guys can do your own little introductions and then we'll jump in.
Cool.
Yeah, you ready? You good? Yeah? Okay, there we go. Oops. Okay. Greetings, everybody. I do apologize for the tardy start. I'm just waiting for everybody to get in the room and get to know each other. We just had a cool little powwow. We forgot about you guys. Forget, that's not true. Forgive me. But yeah, so we're here again. This is session number 2 of day 2 of the GansAccess.com Cannabis Conference and Expo series. This session is using data to capture and keep customers. And we have with us 3 very esteemed guests. We have Gary Allen, the CEO of New Frontier Data. We have Shahbaaz Kara, an astute data science person who works with Dutchie, and Cree Robinson, who is the co-founder of Toucanna, a platform that you'll hear much about very, very soon. But I will ask for them to also introduce themselves. I'm sure they're doing much more astute introduction to myself. Let's just go straight down. Like, Gary, you want to start? And you can go right down.
Sure. Thank you, Omari. My name is Gary Allen. I am the CEO of New Frontier Data. We are the premier data analytics, business research, business intelligence, company in the cannabis industry. Been around since 2014. Spent the last 3 years really focusing in on the consumer and looking forward to speaking with Shahbaaz and Cree today about how data and how the consumers have been maturing and how the market matures and engages with those consumers. So thanks so much, Omari.
Yeah, you're welcome. Please, Shahbaaz, go ahead.
Hey everybody, Amari, first and foremost, thanks for putting this together. It's challenging to get people together, especially as like the world, opens up and, we're in this like gray area. So appreciate it. Real quick on me. I love cannabis. I love tech. Grew up in tech and then moved over to cannabis. I'm especially interested in data analytics, consumer purchases and behaviors, and of course, cannabis and how it's going to affect the sporting world. So right now I'm the Canadian sales leader at Dutchie, and check us out at Dutchie.com whenever you get a chance.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you guys. And thanks, Amari, for putting this together. Like Shahbaaz said, I just put together a huge event a couple of weeks ago and it was madness behind the scenes. So kudos to you for pulling this together. But hey, everyone, I'm Cree Robinson. I'm the co-founder of Toucanna, which is an operations management platform for the retail sector within the cannabis industry. I also love tech and I love cannabis. So what else is there? But yeah, I'm excited to dive into data here and really just talk through how I've seen the perception of data and the importance of data change throughout the industry from when I started to now. So happy to be here. Thanks, everyone.
Well, that's where I'd like to open things up. Is and you have a relatively new platform, Toucanna, which is explain it to me a little bit. But what exactly is Toucanna?
Yeah, so Toucanna is an operations management tool for the retail sector. So essentially it helps dispensaries to manage everything, all the important aspects of their business. So that's everything from sales and inventory to tracking their customers and of course, customer data, workforce management, tasks and checklists, managing their inspections. So lots and lots of data that extends just beyond customers. But one of those essential types of tools similar to Dutchie and New Frontier that really helps those sectors to run successful businesses.
Well, this is I love the fact that all you got to say data, and I'm saying data, and it's just natural for me, but everybody's still the same word. but no, see that's what's interesting to me. So a management system, because even Gary was just talking about how they can even predict growth and so on and so forth. How does tech and data merge? How does that, I guess, feed the other? How do you merge the two?
Yeah, so tech and data, so that's a really good question. Essentially, if I understand correctly, from all of the tools that Gary, Shahbaaz, and I use, we essentially collect that data. We collect that data, and then we make sense of it for the customers, right? So if a particular retail, they're getting, a certain population of customers and they're buying the same type of product, we have tools that can give them reports, for example, and say, okay, at this time of year in June, you've got millennials that typically like this particular strain. So then that can help them, for example, to change their marketing if they need to. So we just collect a lot of data essentially, and then help make sense of it for our customers.
And I guess Gary, you mentioned tell us about New Frontier Data. I know you collect quite a bit of data. You do not do any point of sale systems and so on. So you used to apply data to point of sale systems to, I guess, governments and so on? What's your role in the data collection and disbursement, I guess, in the industry? How does that work? How does that relationship work?
Absolutely. So New Frontier Data, our aspiration is to be the nexus of data for the industry. So what does that mean? So do we, the question that you asked, do we supply data to POS systems, to governments, to operators? The answer to that is yes, right? Do we collect data from governments, from POS systems, from operators? Yes. And so New Frontier Data, we've been around since 2014, as I mentioned earlier, and the maturation of technology and data understanding in the industry has been astounding, especially over the last 3 years. The first couple of years, collecting data in this industry was very much a relationship and phone call and handshake, and we sent a team of people. By example, we sent a team of people out to Humboldt County for 3 months. And they lived in Humboldt County for 3 months, met all of the growers, got familiar, got the trust of those growers. And then we were able to collect the historical data. And obviously when the industry started, data was the equivalent. I always say, if you were keeping your data, basically you were keeping your indictment. And so the idea of watching an industry transform in 7 years from that mentality of opaque and secrecy to understanding that platforms like Cree's platform, and especially with the strength and ubiquitousness now of Dutchie, the platforms being able to share data, understand that competitive data is almost, for the retailers, it's almost table stakes now, right? So understanding what foot traffic is in what areas of which markets, what types of products are selling best. All of that information is very important to operators. And so New Frontier Data, we've really matured with the industry. We started off with macroeconomics in, the investors and the policymakers. We then went to researchers and education, institutions. And we continue to grow. While we continue to grow those capabilities, we have over the last 3 years really matured into consumer understanding the consumer, and doing that through really vetted and regimented data collection. And then, as Cree said, the analysis is the most important part, because if you're not developing insights for your consumers, and you're not making sense of the vast, data that they are collecting, then you're just another platform, right? So all of our platforms have to be, intelligent, insightful, prescriptive to the consumer base that they're serving.
Right. And Shahbaaz, how did Dutchie establish such a large footprint? Because as Gary was saying, it's initially was a lot about relationship building. I'm assuming you've been around since roughly around then, at least Dutchie. So how did that roll out? Do you want to?
Yeah, I really like your question. The variance between tech and data, and how the two of them, play with each other. So I'll speak about Dutchie in a second, and I don't want to take too long. I want to try to be concise, but
that's right. You are also short on time. Everybody, Shahbaaz, will be leaving us early, so please address the questions. Please. Sorry.
Apologies, but I just managed to move the meeting back a couple minutes, so I think I got a couple extras. But real quick, tech and data. There's the one piece which is evaluating the technology, and then there's the other piece which is actually using the technology. And I think that's a big gap in cannabis today. And so I think the rise of data strategists, data-driven decisions is obviously something that we can talk about, we could say constantly, but how are employees or, those evaluators of this tech actually making the transition from seeing the technology and then using it in a data-driven fashion to make those decisions and, segment their consumers and all that sort of stuff. And I think, that's a skill that, a lot of individuals can have from other CPG driven environments, but when you have limited data, or when you have such an interesting consumer, and then also the way in which these technologies fit together, and New Frontier is a fantastic solution. What Cree is doing is incredible, but those are also two different data sources. And then you have companies like Alpine, Spring Big, Dutchie, your POS, there's this need to kind of centralize the data, which, that's what I think is, really challenging for the industry today. And so getting from tech to data, there's this like gap. As far as Dutchie, really quickly, Dutchie's data driven. We're not selling any data. We don't do any of that, but everything that we do, from how we design our menu to the things that we offer our retailers, are all based in data driven decisions, and lots of different research, and more on that to come. But I do think that, to your point, like, there's a huge gap between the actual tech and the data, and like the human capital involved in the knowledge capital involved in like really piecing that together. Because it's not just like CPG from 50 years ago, when you're trying to get a bar of soap to be 1% more in market share or something like that. You're working off Nielsen data or anything like that. It's like the data driven decisions that you make could yield a 10% increase in market share over a quarter, kind of thing. So it makes the room for like acceleration so much greater, but also your competition's doing the same thing. So I guess what I'm trying to get to is tech, data, and in the middle of that, like really people and talent.
Yeah,
that was exactly my question. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Omar. I think Shahbaaz brings up a really good point when you talk about market share, and I think for what you guys are about to do, I think it's really important. For example, we ran an analysis on every retailer in the United States just about 2 months ago, and the best retailer captured 21% of their market. There's a huge amount of white space out there, and what Shahbaaz was talking about, where the old CPG understanding of small incremental growth was sufficient, because the industry is nascent and it is still growing, and it's still in that explosive growth period. The opportunity for operators lies right. The identification of opportunities lies right in that data. Right, when and I'm not going to name the brand of the retailer, but when a very large retailer who is making millions of dollars a month in revenue still only has 10, 15, 20% of their market, the white space opportunity there is immense. And the ability to understand that data very, very fast. Our respective systems and our respective teams are really tasked with making that information available and actionable to those operators.
That would be the next question. I mean, I guess for somebody like Cree, or even it's like a management platform. This is not even customer, reading customers and so on and so forth. Which is what people think when you think of data. Oh, it's like Facebook and Twitter. They're just reading our stuff, so they want to sell us stuff. For a management platform, what kind of data? Because what type of data would help a management system as opposed to, say, a marketer, someone who's trying to establish market share and so on? What's different data sets are you looking at, or is it pretty the same?
So just making sure I understand. So your question is, what's the difference between the type of data that someone in management versus someone in marketing would want to look at? No,
in a systems management platform as opposed to a POS platform. It'd be completely, I'm assuming, I don't know, I'm asking.
Gotcha. Okay. And so I just want to touch on too something that Shahbaaz said when it comes to the centralization of data. I think that's really important. That's one of the things that our platform is trying to do, is instead of having all of these siloed different pieces of software, we have all of that in one system. So therefore your data is going to be more centralized. And I don't want to get into this too much, but when you start talking about AI and machine learning, that's all data. And so if we want this next generation of technology to be set up, or we want these retailers to have access to machine learning and things like that, we have to have good data. Machine learning thrives off of good data. And if it's separated in 8 different platforms, and it's really hard to combine that data and then have good algorithms when it comes to machine learning. But back to your question, which was, so the type of data that would be helpful for the type of data that we're collecting essentially is from all aspects. So customers, of course, that's going to be important in order to capture market share, but we're also capturing data when it comes to things like inspections. So folks can track their inspections in the tool. So if you have, say, similar violations over the past 3 years, then management can look at that and say, okay, this is where we're a little bit weaker. And this is where we can take our human capital, to a point that was made earlier. And this is where maybe we need to apply some talent in order to fill this gap, so that we're not having we're not experiencing the same violation in the future. So therefore we can keep our business successful. So that's just kind of one example. But when it comes to data and the things that you're looking at, it's important to, and I think the industry is getting here. I think I've seen a difference from when we first started and folks kind of had a very tunnel vision way of thinking about kind of the data that's needed. And now folks are thinking about, okay, well, I need to think about running my business from a holistic perspective. It's not just, okay, what are the customers buying? Or it's not just sales and inventory. Now it's, all right, what is my data looking like in terms of how my employees are performing during the week? Do I have one employee that's performing better on the weekend versus the weekday? So maybe that'll change how I create the schedule. You know what I mean? Like you got to look at it from all different aspects in order to run your operation in a successful way.
Cree, I love that. That's awesome. I didn't know that, you were looking at it like that. You're building that. That's really cool. And I think that like it's super powerful for empowering employees and like really building out like the strongest possible team of talent that you can do, especially because, retail turnover is so high. So having that sort of detailed, data on your employees and your internal staff and, just being able to like, to drive efficiency with that is really cool. It's impressive.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that.
Right on. And let me ask, Gary, let me ask you this. Again, we're talking about a lot more on the consumer side of data. You mentioned that data could also help with growth systems and even do predictive growth output. Explain that to me, please.
Sure, absolutely. So, in Cree, obviously in today's day and age, we can't talk about the collection and analysis of data without talking about machine learning or artificial intelligence. And I think one of the great things about being in this industry right now is that we have to rebuild our supply chains from the mature world here, but we get to shorten the learning curve because we're bringing what we've known from the mature markets into this market. As far as predictive inventorying or predictive growing, AI enables us. So machine learning through ingestion and then AI through analysis and production. Well, we are able to, and we are testing. New Frontier Data is testing a platform now that allows vertically integrated operators to determine what they're going to grow the season prior, so that by predicting what they're going to sell the season after.
Right.
So if we know what they're going to sell in November, we can tell them in June what they should be growing, right? And then manufacturing and what their packaging should look like, who they should be talking to, so on and so forth. And so we are really able to, through the true application of machine learning, again through ingestion, making sure that data collection, and Cree talked about this very early on, data collection is the most important part of this, right? And there's a the nerds have, and I am one, nerds have been saying, we've been saying for years, kind of that crap in, crap out, and that's the cleanest that statement goes. But if you don't collect the data properly, organize that data and make it available to the AI system, then you don't train that AI system in such a way that it knows to go look for the proper data. If all of that works, what you're able to do is actually pretty fantastic. So again, we're able to tell vertically integrated operators kind of through their entire grow to seed to sale, what strains and how much and what volumes they should be growing, what products they should be manufacturing as a result of that grow, when they're going to sell and where they're going to sell that. In one of the operators that we're testing this in now, they have obviously multiple retail locations in one state, but the products that they're manufacturing, they distribute evenly throughout the state. Well, we've kind of been able to go in and show them, well, that doesn't make sense based on the population that lives around each one of those dispensaries. And so again, if the data is collected in a normalized, a standard normalized way, you're able to produce some really incredible insights and really efficiencies that can come if you're, back to what Shahbaaz said earlier about the old CPG method of trying to get 1%, 2%, 3% incremental increase in sales. If you're able to show a 10% increase in this product on store number one, and a 10% increase in a separate or different product in store number two, but you're only inventorying to that capability or to that sales prediction, then the efficiency you get in costing, the efficiency you get in marketing, the efficiency you get even in human capital and deploying human capital, it really makes that the incremental marginal lift huge.
Yeah. Shahbaaz, what have you seen? Because I'm wondering if you like entering new markets, like you're mentioning a large state operator with multiple dispensaries and so on. Where I'm sure, Shahbaaz, do you see trends where even different neighborhoods are going to require different products? Do you see that in your with your systems?
Absolutely, and I gotta say, this is probably going to be the last thing I say before I go. But again, Amari, thank you, man. Gary, Cree, I've learned a ton from being on this. Of course, so just like looking at like my hometown of Toronto, and like the ethnic diversity in Toronto and like the neighborhood of neighborhoods. I mean, there's gonna have to be like significant segmentation by that consumer profile. I mean, downtown Toronto is not going to be the same as Woodbridge or where my mom lives in Ajax, right? And all her friends live, and she's a Kenyan Indian immigrant, so I've already seen my dad, he's getting heavy into topicals, right? So how do you capture him? Because there's a lower barrier to entry, right? So if the data is telling you that topicals are only 3% of the market, but you can capture that niche 3% and drive a deeper basket size with that market, well, what's the opportunity cost of positioning yourself there as a retailer versus somewhere else, right? And it's really about following like the consumer buying journey, because cannabis is such a complicated, beautiful plant. Like, it was illicit, it's medicinal, it's there's so many different things. It's cultural. There's so many different things about cannabis, and depending on the barrier to entry, depending on the form factor, depending on the dosing, depending on the education level, like there's just so many things that go into this, and that's why like it's great to have data, but it's like also you need a strategy and like really need to understand like what you as a dispensary or a retailer, like what your value proposition is, right? Because do you want all the data in the world? Probably not, like, right? Like you can't get everything to everyone, and if you do, there's a lower chance of winning. And shameless plug on Dutchie, one of the reasons I love working at the company is because it's one thing to be ruthless in your focus, or say that you're ruthless in your focus, but Dutchie's been really ruthless in how they've kind of focused on building out the e-commerce and now the POS landscape. So just food for thought in the sense of like data is great, but like the type of data and how it really matches to your persona and what you're trying to achieve is even better when you marry the two. More on this conversation. I can't wait to chat.
Yeah,
more.
we're talking tomorrow. That's right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Take care.
Thanks,
Bye.
See ya.
All right. Well, actually, I'm gonna throw that back. I'm gonna throw a question out to you, Gary. So what happens when a multi-state operator now is moving into a new state? You've collected data from various other states, surrounding states, and so on. This is now a new state. How well are you able to guide their successful entry into that state with your data collection? And
Well,
have you failed? Have you missed the mark at any? Will you say that? I don't know.
Well, I don't. To the blunt answer to the question is no. We really have not missed the mark. We, like I said, we have matured with the industry. Right. In 2015, when investors would come to us and ask us, okay, we're going to go for a license in this state. It's a very, very macroeconomic market entry, very methodical research into that market, and we would build scenario-based market entry deliverables for them, and then they would pick the way that they wanted to go based on the money that they had, the risks that they were willing to take, and so on. Today, it's much different. Today it's when you look at the population, let's say it's a retailer, right? So you said a multi-state operator. The question was a multi-state operator moving into a new marketplace. right? First thing you're going to do is define what that market is. And if it's a retailer, the market consists of the consumers. The consumers make the opportunity. And so, the way that we start any project like that is we look at the data first, which is population, then the propensity, right? The probabilistic data of how much, what part of that population are going to be cannabis consumers. We have modeled every single market in the United States and 70 some markets around the world. We sell data in 125 markets around the 125 countries around the world. And so we have a lot of experience and therefore a lot of data. So market entry is it's one of those sweet spots for us. And we've actually gotten to the point now that if it is an operator where it used to be a very consultative, human capital intensive, expensive process to do, it's now almost all data, right? So somebody types in, basically, gives us a zip code, gives us a dollar amount that they're going to be investing. We give them five locations, basically, or 6 locations based on priority, and we prioritize them based on their specific needs, and from there the data can flow. We can give them population size, the breakdown of that population into medical consumers, recreational consumers, health and wellness consumers, BMW buyers. It doesn't matter, right? We can tell them everything they need to know about the consumer around that particular dispensary spot, and then also help them build their predictive or their revenue projections based on the types of consumers, the types of products that those consumers want to consume. We have over the last 3 years, we've actually interviewed more than 20,000 consumers in live 20-minute interviews, and surveyed them in 4 or 5 now different surveys. But we've also analyzed in excess of about $8 billion now in shopping carts over that same period of time. And so when you put those two data sets alone, just those 2 data sets alone together, the amount of consumer intelligence you get is amazing. So market entry becomes actually almost an AI result.
Okay. And this is, I guess, relatively recent, because there are a lot of poor projections in the past. What was the reason? What was the reason for the explosive projections in like 2015, back in the day? What was the reason for that?
Well, I think one of the reasons was, and Cree, I'm not meaning to monopolize the conversation. I think one of the reasons was that and still to this day, most market research companies in this industry, they do not understand how to differentiate the illicit market and the legal market. Right, and so it's a huge, it's a huge undertaking, and it took us about 4.5 years to build enough models to get comfortable with modeling the illicit market. And if you don't model, the problem is if you only model the retail market, right, the legal retail market, you get linear growth. If you understand the total market, and you understand the dimension between the illicit and the legal and the percentages of those, then you get more 3-dimensional. You get the ability to do more of a 3-dimensional model. For example, there's an old adage which actually rings pretty true. 80% of all cannabis, sold or grown in California winds up in New York.
Right. Yes, I've heard that. It's not an adage. Well, that's probably the truth.
It's really true. Right.
Oh, there you go.
So we'll give you. So last year we did $20.3 billion. Right. We believe, and we've modeled that $20.3 billion in legal retail sales in the United States represents about 30% of the cannabis consumers. About 70% of the market is still illicit.
So
right?
really,
And there's a
I
number of
would
reasons for that. And so I think the original question, why were some of the numbers so huge in 2014, 2015? Because people would do a very easy, and I think Cree would agree with this, people will do a very easy population model. So, for example, 235 million Americans are above the age of 18. Okay, well, great, let's start there, right? If we start at that number, and we know the average consumer spends $159 a month, well, then there's a number, and that number is huge.
Right.
Well, it's a lot more complex than that, and so I think that's why the numbers have reduced. As far as the sexiness of the number is reduced, but realistically, there was about $80 billion of cannabis sold in 2020.
It was still right.
Only 20.3 billion of it was legal.
Only 23, right? Only, right? Yeah, right on. Cree, let me bring in real quick because we do have another session starting in just a few minutes. I guess let me just round out the question with well, where do you see? I asked another session as well. What's you were talking about? What is missing in the links between? Sorry, let me bring this in. So what's missing in the links between tech, cannabis, and that? So what are the trends in tech and cannabis that you would like to see coming? With the inclusion, of course, incorporation of data and AI. What are we looking at in 5 years from now with what kind of an industry, tech wise, AI? I mean, am I going to walk in and say this? Just go to my phone and say this is the kind of mood I'm in. I'm kind of irritated right now, and they can say, okay, Mario, look, you need to have just eat this gummy and you'll be fine at 5. I mean, what's it going to be? What's it going to look like? Please.
That's a good
question.
That's a great place there.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I can tell you what I think will happen. I can tell you what I'd like to see. So, like I said, just the change in the perception of data from only a year and a half ago to now, it's been amazing to see, like, the importance that retailers are, just cannabis business in general, but of course our customers are retailers, that they're putting on data and the types of data that they're collecting. A couple of our customers have asked about geofencing, for example. So that's probably going to be more of something that we see in the future, in the very near future. One of the things that I would like to see, I think, is, like we talked about earlier, is the more centralization of data, as opposed to, you want clean data, right? And we talked about AI earlier. If you want good algorithms, you need clean data. And so one of the best ways to get clean data is to have unified data from a single source, as opposed to a bunch of different platforms. So that's just to keep it concise there. That's what I think will happen in the near future, and that's what I'd like to see happen.
Gary, do you want to answer the same question?
Sure. Listen, so I mean, there are many different aspects to answering that question. So if we're thinking supply chain, seed to sale will become much more a predictive algorithm. So while as Cree just talked about, while there will be a unified, normalized, standardized collection method, the understanding of where that plant is going to end up is pretty predictable, in what format, in what fit and form from a product. As far as consumers are concerned, I think when the cannabis industry started, we all believed that there was going to be this boutique sommelier almost experience when you went into dispensaries. And what we found out is, while there is that capability, there are certain markets that absolutely have that, and dispensary owners try that. The rule of business, of profit, dictates that this is still a value-based market, just kind of like every other CPG market. And then in that, the maturation of our consumer understanding will lead to a really cool boutique sommelier-like cottage experience. But we're still going to have to address the masses, but we're going to do both of those at the same time. And I think where technology and data are really going to influence the retail section of this sector of this market is going to be in that consumer experience. Shahbaaz said earlier, and it was a really important point, that eventually the dispensaries are going to have to really worry about their particular consumer experience and their brand. Right now, they're in a bare knuckle boxing match for the foot traffic that goes past their door, right? Just to stay afloat. But as technology gets better, as data gets better and more standardized, and as we get a better understanding of the consumer, the competitive intelligence portion of this market will be table stakes. We'll all know what our, everybody will know what the foot traffic is in just like every other retailer in the world. Walmart knows the foot traffic of that plot of land before they put that building there.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And that's publicly available information. That type of information is going to become available in the industry and is available now in the industry. And as that becomes more consumed by the operators, they're really going to get freed up to really address their consumer in a meaningful way and build that loyalty and the brand advocates that they're looking for.
That's interesting. That means that a lot of the entrepreneurial journey will actually become kind of boring because you're gonna know what's gonna happen. It's all the mystery. Is this gonna work? Is it gonna be? I don't know. You're gonna kind of know. Oh well, if I invest in this, we do this. Well, I'll make that amount of profit. Yeah, I'm good with that. I'm just. I
don't know, man. I've been an entrepreneur for about 27 years.
Yeah.
And it's still a journey, and it's still pretty exciting, and it's never boring.
It's never boring. I could fully agree. Cree, if you want to chime in, any last words? Any boring entrepreneurial stories for you? Sorry, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think, like being an entrepreneur, especially in this industry, you really, we can use data to predict as much as possible, but at the end of the day, this industry changes so rapidly. So I always feel for, especially operators, because the legislation changes so quickly and they have to keep up with everything. But all that to say, we can predict as much as we can, but there's still so much unexpected, I think, that we're in for. So I think we just got to be as agile as we can and try to keep up and stay ahead of the curve as much as possible.
Right on. All right. I do need to wrap things up. On that note, thank you very much to Gary, to Cree, and Shahbaaz. Shahbaaz had to leave early. This is a great session. I wish it could have been a little bit longer, but we do have literally at 12 o'clock. That has to happen at 12 o'clock. So I have to run. We will pick up. Thank you very much. All right. This is great. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks
so much,
Gary. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.